What's the true cost of a flood? We see the dramatic images on the news, cars floating like toys, houses submerged to their rooftops, heroic helicopter rescues. But what happens when the news crews leave and the water recedes? That's when the real story begins. A major flood isn't a single, isolated event. It's the first domino in a long and complex chain reaction, a ripple effect that spreads from a single street to an entire nation, and sometimes even across the globe. It seeps into the foundations of our economies, tears at the fabric of our communities, and leaves behind scars, both visible and invisible, that can last for generations. Today, we're going to dissect the anatomy of a major flood. We'll follow the ripples from the initial, devastating impact to the quiet, long-term struggles of recovery. It's a story of immense challenge, deep-seated inequality, and the remarkable, though often strained, resilience of the human spirit. Forget what you think you know about floods. The reality is far more complex and interconnected than you can imagine. Let's start with the moment of inundation. The sheer force of rapidly rising water is terrifying. Flash floods, in particular, can turn a calm street into a raging river in minutes, offering almost no warning and tragically causing more fatalities than their slower-moving riverine counterparts. The loss of human life is, of course, the most irreversible consequence. But for the survivors, the immediate aftermath is a landscape of loss. Homes, businesses, personal belongings, everything can be submerged and ruined. There's an immense emotional toll in losing irreplaceable possessions and the fundamental security of a home. But this is just the beginning of a bureaucratic marathon. For many, the next months will be a frustrating journey through insurance claims, damage assessments, and the desperate search for resources to repair, rebuild, or relocate. While individuals grapple with this personal crisis, the bedrock of their society is also being washed away. Infrastructure. Think about roads, bridges, and railway lines. They aren't just concrete and steel, they're lifelines. The 2011 floods in the Somerset Levels in the UK completely isolated several villages when roads were submerged for weeks. This doesn't just cut people off, it critically hampers rescue and relief efforts. Emergency services can't get in, and vulnerable people can't get out. Power plants, communication networks, and water and sewage systems are also extremely vulnerable. A breakdown in these essential services renders entire districts uninhabitable and businesses non-functional, triggering mass evacuations and long-term displacement. The initial economic shockwave is staggering. According to the Joint Economic Committee, the annual cost of flooding in the United States alone ranges from a massive $179.8 billion to an almost unbelievable $496 billion. To bring that down to a personal level, research shows that just a single inch of water in an average 2,500 square foot home can lead to damages of up to $23,000. Now scale that up across thousands of homes. Businesses suffer a double hit: the direct costs of repairs and the total loss of inventory and equipment. The immediate halt to economic activity brings commerce to a standstill, and the loss of livelihoods extends far beyond the flood's duration. The initial deluge may recede, but the economic aftershocks can be felt for years, sometimes decades. This is the long, slow grind of recovery. One of the most significant long-term impacts is the damage to a region's productive capacity. Take agriculture. When floodwaters, especially from the sea, cover farmland, they can leave behind high concentrations of salt, rendering the soil infertile for years. River floods can deposit pollutants and contaminants. During the 2011 Mississippi River floods, vast swaths of America's breadbasket were inundated, causing an estimated $3 billion in property damage. This isn't just a problem for farmers. It ripples out to affect food security and prices for all of us. Businesses that survive the initial flood face their own long road. Many are forced to close temporarily or permanently, leading to widespread job losses and a sharp decline in local economic activity. This is where we see the truly global nature of the ripple effect. The 2011 floods in Thailand are a perfect case study. Thailand was a critical hub for manufacturing hard drives and automotive parts. When the factories flooded, it caused a global shortage. Car manufacturers in Japan and the United States had to halt production lines because they couldn't get essential components. The price of computer hard drives skyrocketed. This single localized flood caused a 76% reduction in Thailand's expected GDP growth rate for that year. The disruption to supply chains can be incredibly precise and damaging. The Mississippi River flood in the same year led to the suspension of barge traffic. Barges are the lifeblood of commerce on the river, moving grain, coal, and other bulk goods. Halting them tied up an estimated $300 million a day in transportation costs. Even companies that are nowhere near the flood can be hit. A 2021 study on floods in Belgium found that firms that were completely dry and untouched experienced significant reductions in sales, simply because their suppliers were affected. This interconnectedness is a vulnerability of our modern economy. Then there's the housing market. In the aftermath, property values in flood-prone areas often decline. Insurance premiums can skyrocket, making it impossible for residents to afford coverage or sell their homes. This creates climate ghettos, where people are financially trapped in high-risk areas. And the financial burden on governments is immense. After Hurricane Katrina, the U.S. government spent over $120 billion on relief and recovery. The 2019 Townsville floods in Australia were estimated to cause a $2.5 billion reduction in the region's GDP. This strain on public finances means less money for everything else, hindering a region's growth for years to come. Beyond the staggering economic figures, a flood tears at the very fabric of society, leaving deep and lasting scars on individuals and communities. The social consequences are multifaceted and can be just as devastating. Displacement is the most immediate and disruptive social impact. Being forced to leave your home and community creates a profound sense of loss and disorientation. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, over 200,000 people were displaced from New Orleans. A significant portion of them never returned. A city lost a piece of its soul. This displacement shatters social networks. The informal support systems people rely on, neighbors checking in on each other, friends providing childcare, are broken. The closure of schools, community centers, and places of worship further erodes this sense of community. Even the cancellation of social events like local festivals or sports competitions can have a huge impact on social morale and can hurt tourism, which is a vital source of income for many small towns. The health impacts are both physical and psychological. Immediate dangers include drowning and injuries, but afterwards, contaminated floodwaters can lead to outbreaks of waterborne diseases like gastroenteritis. In the longer term, the damp and mold that infest flooded homes are a serious health hazard, known to exacerbate respiratory problems like asthma and bronchitis. But perhaps the most insidious impact is on mental health. The trauma of surviving the event, combined with the loss of loved ones, property, and the chronic stress of the recovery process, is a recipe for a mental health crisis. Studies have shown that people whose homes have been flooded are significantly more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. One landmark study following the 2013-14 winter floods in the UK found that flood victims were 6 to 7 times more likely to develop these conditions. And the sheer depth of the water matters. One analysis found that having over a meter of water in your home increased the likelihood of these conditions by as much as 18 times. Children are particularly vulnerable. The loss of their home, their toys, their school, and the disruption to their routine can undermine their fundamental sense of safety and security, leading to long-lasting psychological trauma. Now, it's a cruel reality that the pain of a flood is not distributed equally. Disasters expose and amplify the existing inequalities in our society, with the most vulnerable populations invariably bearing the heaviest burden. Low-income communities are disproportionately affected. Due to the lower cost of housing, they are far more likely to live in high-risk areas, such as low-lying land, or behind inadequate flood defenses. They also have fewer resources to prepare, no money for sandbags or emergency kits, and even fewer to recover. Many lack adequate insurance, and if they have it, they may struggle to navigate the complex claims process. The financial shock of a flood can be utterly devastating for a low-income household, leading to increased debt, mortgage default, and even bankruptcy. This isn't an accident. It's often the result of history. In the U.S., historical patterns of discrimination, like redlining, pushed racial and ethnic minorities into these less desirable, flood-prone areas. As a result, studies show that Black and minority communities often face a higher flood risk and are served by older, less adequate infrastructure. They can also face systemic barriers when trying to access disaster relief and recovery aid, a failure that was starkly illustrated in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Other vulnerable groups include the elderly, who may have mobility issues that make evacuation difficult, and are more susceptible to the physical and mental health impacts of flooding. People with disabilities face unique challenges in evacuation and finding accessible temporary housing. And renters are often at the mercy of landlords for repairs and can face rent hikes or eviction after a disaster. So the ripple effect of a flood doesn't just spread out, it flows downwards, concentrating its worst effects on those least able to cope. From a single drop of rain to a global economic disruption, the anatomy of a major flood is a complex, interconnected, and deeply sobering phenomenon. The initial inundation is just the beginning. The ripples spread through our economies, our supply chains, our communities, and our minds. It's a cascading crisis that shows just how fragile our modern systems are. As we face a future with a changing climate, where scientists predict more frequent and more intense flooding, understanding this full ripple effect is more critical than ever. The challenge isn't just about building higher walls and better dams. It's about building more resilient and, crucially, more equitable societies, so that when the waters rise, we can ensure that everyone has a chance to stay afloat.